Boldwood presents The Accident, written by L.H. Stacey and read by Anne Dover. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Kate Duggan heard the kitchen door click to a close. It was done quietly, almost secretively, but still managed to catch her attention. She was more than aware that her boyfriend Rob was at home, but after watching him mess with his mobile phone for over an hour, she'd taken herself upstairs for a bath and was now laying on the bed, reading. Feeling sure that he was up to no good, and with a pointed foot worthy of a prize in ballet, she slid it out from beneath the duvet. Holding her breath, she hoped that the floorboards wouldn't creak, or that the door wouldn't give her away as she crept onto the landing, where she stood and listened to the whispered tones that came from the kitchen. For a moment she thought that someone had arrived at the house, and wondered who the late-night visitor could be. But the only voice she could hear was Rob's, a clear indication that he had answered his phone, and having taken the call in another room, clearly didn't want her eavesdropping. "I'm not doing it," she heard Rob snap. "Stick to the damn plan. It's under control." In an instant, his rapidly spoken words were drowned out by the sound of the radio. "Rob?" Kate shouted. "Is everything okay?" She made her way down the stairs and felt the rough, cold wooden flooring beneath her feet. She glanced over her shoulder longingly towards her bedroom where her slippers were, and with a sigh she saw the amber glow spilling from her room, lighting up the shadows of the rest of the cottage. It was a warmth that always drew her in and stirred up memories that never failed to set off an ache that was deep within her. Memories of her grandmother, who had loved River Cottage, but who was now sadly gone, leaving Kate alone with only the house as a small reminder that she'd ever existed at all. "For God's sake, stop calling!" Rob's voice temporarily rose above the sound of the radio, but then diminished as he moved further away from the door. The sound of his feet against the wooden floor trudged with a monotonous echo that came and went, making Kate wonder if he was circling the island impatiently. "Not a chance. Not again." His voice was drowned out by the noise in the room, and Kate pressed her ear as close as she could to the door in a vain attempt to hear every word that was said. His cold words sent chills down her spine, but Rob was involved in something bad, something she wouldn't like. It was a thought that made her heart accelerate faster than normal, and now, with a hand held to her chest, she could feel it pounding away at a dangerous and alarming rate. "What do I do?" Kate began to question her actions. Doing this, skulking around and listening to private conversations, was something she shouldn't have to do. Not here, in her own home. Yet it had become normal just lately, so she could give Rob the space he apparently needed. Taking a step back, she suddenly realized just how little she knew about the man she lived with. Theirs had been a whirlwind romance that had taken her by surprise. One minute they'd been going out on a first date. The next, he'd turned up on the doorstep, asking if he could stay. And in a moment of madness, she'd happily agreed. And now she kicked herself for being so weak, for not making it clear that the accommodation had only been offered on a temporary basis. She placed her fingers on the door handle, saw the way her hand was trembling with nerves, and dared herself to push it wide open and burst into the room with the element of surprise. It was what she had every intention of doing. But before she could, the door was flung open, and Kate found herself looking up and into Rob's dark, angry eyes. "Kate!" Rob suddenly bellowed. "What's your damn problem?" In an attempt to keep her voice calm, Kate took her time and resisted the urge to yell back in response. "What's my problem?" she asked in a confident voice. And for a split second, she felt thankful for her police training, which still held one or two advantages. "I could ask you the same thing." She looked over his shoulder and into the small, compact kitchen beyond. "I'm not the one creeping around, am I?" Nodding thoughtfully, she looked at him through different eyes. Rather than seeing the personal trainer she'd fallen for, the man with the perfect body, she now saw the cold glare of his eyes, the hands that were curled to form fists. A powerhouse that could easily strike out. "Wow. Do you know what, Rob? I would apologize," she said carefully. "But for some reason, I thought this was my house, and the last time I checked, I didn't need your damn permission to walk around it." "No one said you needed permission, Kate. But you should show a little respect." Your ear was pressed to the door. He picked up a glass, drank the dregs of his juice. "I wouldn't dream of doing that to you." Reeling, Kate took a step backwards. She couldn't believe he'd try to turn this on her. She wasn't the one making secret phone calls, speaking in riddles or acting peculiar. "Is that right?" she threw back. "Well, for all I knew, someone was here." She pulled at her short satin dressing gown. "And I'm hardly dressed for visitors, am I?" With narrowed eyes, Rob looked her up and down and angrily ran a hand through his dark, perfectly styled hair. His other hand was pressed against his side, his phone still held tightly in his hand, the screen still lit. "I need a drink," she lied, and aggressively pushed her way past him. Flinging open a cupboard, she stared inside. "So who was on the phone?" She kept her eyes on the cupboard, gave choosing a glass far too much thought, and eventually she picked one out, held it under the tap, and filled it with water. "It's work. One of my clients, a new one." She nodded slowly, tried to decide which of his many clients would need a personal call so late at night. "Rob, you're a personal trainer, not a doctor. What on earth can't wait until morning?" "Kate," he barked, "this call is important." He flicked his head to the door, a clear indication that he wanted her gone. It was enough to make Kate take a sharp step backwards. She knew that leaving him to get on would be easier than standing there arguing, and for what felt like the 100th time that week, she considered her options and tried to decide how she could ask him to leave without causing a fight. "Well, don't be long." She couldn't resist throwing in the last word, and after giving him an unwavering glare, she spun on her heel to head for the stairs. "I start my new job tomorrow. An early night would have been nice." Rolling her eyes regretfully at the innuendo, she caught Rob's eye and saw the anger within. It was a look that told her to leave, that the caller was still on the phone, and that whoever it was had been listening in on every word they'd said. "Kate, I've asked nicely," he said. "Now, for the love of God, go to bed." Thrusting a hand towards the door, and with a powerful flick of his fingers, Kate saw the door fly towards her and slam in front of her face. Shocked, she held onto the wall. Her pride was wounded. Her temper rose, and with her mouth opening and closing, ready to shout, she slammed a hand against the door and banged as hard as she could. You need to find somewhere else to live. Do you hear me?" she shouted angrily. She climbed the stairs at speed, and just for good measure, she slammed the bedroom door behind her. Sitting down on the edge of the bed, Kate reached for the glass of wine she'd poured earlier to drink in the bath, and took a long, slow drink, allowing the rich, dark red liquid to coat her throat, while contemplating her future. Placing the glass back down on the bedside table, she stared at a photograph of her and Rob with sad, wistful eyes. It had been taken on an impromptu holiday she and Rob had taken not too long after they'd met, and at a time when she thought they'd been happy. And without a doubt they had been. Until Rob had become homeless, and Kate had foolishly allowed him to move in with her, even though it had been much too soon. But she'd hoped he was the true love she'd always been searching for, had always wanted. How wrong could you have been?